Hi everyone, I'm David Reeder, and we are off deck. And we're back. We're excited to bring you regular new episodes starting this week. And we've got a good guest today, Olympian for Canada and 2014 NCAA Swimmer of the Year, Brittany MacLean. You can check out our interview right now. Britt, thanks for coming on. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So you retired after the Olympics last year, but you're right back in the thick of things at the World Champs this year as the FINA color announcer on the broadcast worldwide. You did that short course Worlds as well. So first, tell us, what's that been like?
It's honestly been awesome. I think it's helped my transition a lot. Being involved in the sport in so many different ways has really helped me move from the athlete just into a future professional, hopefully. So, yeah, it's been awesome. I got to travel. I got to watch some of my teammates compete, and it teaches you a lot about so many different things. I was preparing for things. I was researching events. I was live on air. There's so many different things that were so new. So yeah, it was exciting. And like I said, it's just nice to be a part of it and be in the building when a lot of my close friends and old competitors were, achieving some of their dreams. So that was cool.
You showed me some of your prep notes. It was pretty intense. I think that job's a lot harder than people realize.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, I had a lot more respect after the meet as a whole for just coaching staff, any on deck and off deck people, just the hours that are involved in a meet when you're, for swimmers, especially at an international meet. Most of us aren't racing every single day. It's every couple days, but then being on the other side of it, you're go, go, go the whole time. And it's not the same physical energy, obviously, but by the end I got my typical post-meet sickness just from the hours and the crazy atmosphere. But yeah, definitely it required more prep than I probably would have imagined. It was just, especially working for someone like FINA where, I was covering an international feed. So there was no bias involved, no particular countries. So just trying to be well-rounded, trying to make sure you're keeping an eye on just little things like different countries' national records and maybe a few little accomplishments throughout. And obviously we have some really great resources, but also trying to add to it and finding a few personal facts was always important. So yeah, but it was a balance and I loved it. Like I said, it was just such a cool thing to be a part of. And I loved being on the air. And the first few days are always, a little bit new and exciting and nerve-wracking. And then by the end of it, you're like, why was I even nervous to do this? So you kind of get into a rhythm and a routine.
Yeah. 8 days is a long time. I can attest to that. It's a very long time for a swim meet. And once you're day 3, you're getting tired. And by day 6, you're like, okay, home stretch. Here we go. It's a long one. So while you're up there, like you said, you weren't supposed to necessarily show bias, but you had a lot of teammates and close friends who were competing. So how do you handle those situations, both with the Canadian swimmers you knew well and also your friends from Georgia?
Yeah, so I saw it as just an advantage going into the meet because I have this personal relationship with a good chunk. I had the Canadians because I'm a Canadian swimmer, and I was teammates with a lot of them. A lot of them were at the Olympics the year before, some of them even from my club team, so that was pretty cool. And then I go over the spectrum to the American side, and, I knew my teammates from Georgia, but I also know of almost all of the swimmers. I'm pretty sure everyone knows of all the American swimmers, but, swimming NCAA, it gives you a close relationship with a lot of people, and if you're not friends with everyone, you have the mutual friends somewhere, so that definitely helped me. Not necessarily, talking about personal details, but I found it beneficial. For example, I got to call, Kalish is going to have strong breaststroke in here in the IM. And, not necessarily everyone on their TVs at home knows who's good at what stroke. So just little things that became advantageous to me. But definitely the emotional side was a little bit tricky. Especially, I had some of my teammates that I hadn't seen for quite some time and being live for every session of the meet. It's not like I could come down and say hi on deck or anything. So knowing that they were there but not really being able to see people was a little bit challenging, and giving them their space and their time to focus, as well as, doing the balancing act. But I was very emotional. I remember vividly during Kylie Moss's world record swim. I thought it was going to happen. I knew she could do it, all of that stuff. So all that positive energy was there. But, as it's happening, like my heart's pounding, I think my partner, Mike McCann, kind of knew in advance that, I kind of warned him, I'm going to be a little bit engaged in this race. And so that's one of the tough things about doing, especially the neutral commentary is, I don't really, someone asked me about, I was talking about Chantel's relay split. And normally I'd be watching, Team Canada go up and down the pool. But for this kind of atmosphere, you are just so focused in the whole thing in general. You're not really like focusing on a certain individual. So that was a little bit different and unique than I was used to. But for Kylie's race, I was kind of all eyes on Kylie. And Mike McCann, my partner, he always calls the finish. So I have to be done talking by, I don't know, at least 20 to 15 meters going into the wall. So, sometimes it's hard to wrap up my thought. But with that one, I didn't really have words. Like, I talked about her in the first 50, and then we talked about the turn and the flip, and she's not normally out the fastest. So that part, I wasn't necessarily all talking about her. And then you get kind of overwhelmed. It's only 2-lap race, and then he called to finish. And afterwards, I was just like, I was trying to watch her. I was trying to look for her parents. I was so overwhelmed in the moment, obviously. Just in general, first of all, she's one of my great friends. Second of all, we haven't had a Canadian break a world record since '09, and we haven't had a world champion on the female side since way before that. So, first of all, it's just a huge moment to be a Canadian and a Canadian swimming alumni, I guess, now. So that's kind of odd. But for the rest of the session, I was standing because, I was shaking so much. So I spent the next 2 hours just literally standing there because I couldn't stay still. Luckily, I'm not on camera, so you couldn't see what I was doing. But I'm, shaking, trying to hold my papers, trying to read what I'm trying to say, getting into the next heat, trying to sing my national anthem. So there's just an overwhelming amount of different things that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, but you learn to adapt. And it was nice to be able to be there and witness the moment, not necessarily the same way I'm used to doing. So it was special.
Yeah, it was definitely, that was a pretty cool race. I'm going to admit, even though I was downstairs off deck, you could tell it was a pretty cool moment for Canada right there.
Yeah.
So I wanna rewind and talk about the end of your swimming career last year. You wrote for the CBC a few months ago that you knew the Olympics were going to be it. Why did you decide in advance, and how did you come to that decision that Rio was going to be it for you?
Yeah, it's hard. I think as a swimmer, a lot of us, it's that battle. Are we going to go pro? Are we not going to go pro? My big goal was to make it through college swimming. And I think a lot of athletes, it goes underrated how huge of an accomplishment it is to make it through 4 years of college swimming. But it really is, no matter if you're on D1, D2, D3, wherever you are. I always have huge respect for athletes that, they get through that whole experience. And that was something I wasn't necessarily worried about, the fact that I wasn't going to get through it. But that was the main idea. So I knew I had those next 4 years, and I was conveniently enough, the Olympic cycles rolled with that. So for me, my first Olympics was right after high school, going into Georgia, and then after my last year at Georgia was the next round of Olympics. And for Canadians, our Olympic trials are first week of April, so it was NCAA right into trials. But yeah, it's still crazy because at the back of my mind, I still feel like it was just yesterday, but now I'm over a year in retirement. So a little bit odd, definitely time flies. But for me, my decision was based on a bunch of different factors. One of them being because it was the end of my kind of schooling phase in my life, I wanted to start working on, how can I get out in the workforce? How can I start building a career? How can I maybe lead that next passion toward my life and discover it? Because for so long, swimming was all I knew, and sport has been my only passion. I hope to stay involved in sport. However, though, I studied sport management in school, and that's kind of where I want to continue to go. But just trying to find out maybe some other talents of mine, finding out what else makes me happy outside of the pool was a big one. Another one was just some injury past. I had a really bad shoulder life. So I started out as a youngin with some difficult shoulder injuries. And then right before, when I started Georgia, I had the tear in my labrum, and just going on and off with that. I guess it took its toll on me. I physically was able to keep it under wraps for my last year, my senior year. as well as the Olympic year, which very lucky and very conveniently for me. But just getting myself to that moment took a lot of physical and emotional stress. And I was just at a point where, I had done everything that more than I had ever thought I would in the pool. And I loved the sport of swimming, but I no longer loved swimming myself. So I was kind of traveling into a depression that I didn't really want to get stuck in. And I felt like, while I still love the sport, I can find other ways to be involved without necessarily doing the things that no longer interest me and were maybe taking me down not so great of a path. And I wanted to be able to make the decision on my own terms. So for me, it was that, ending on an Olympic year was huge. I got to be a senior at the University of Georgia. I got to win an NCAA championship that year with my team. And to go out on the Olympics just made sense for me, as well as, for me financially, it wasn't a lot holding me in the sport. I had a little bit of support from, government sources and a few little things, but I wasn't a sponsored athlete. I didn't have this huge amount of money that was maybe holding me on to it. So just for a lot of those little reasons, it seemed like the smart choice for me, and I'm very glad I made it.
Yeah. You also wrote about how you had won a medal in the 800 free relay, but you were very disappointed with how you did individually and how you felt like how you weren't satisfied even though you had won a medal and you were part of something so big for Canada. How did you ever reconcile those disappointed emotions with those proud emotions? Because, you are and will forever be an Olympic medalist.
Yeah, I definitely, when I get to sit down and say that is one of my accomplishments, I'm super proud, I'm super excited. And you mentioned one of the big parts of that is the being involved in the Canadian team that was that big powerhouse at the Olympics, and that's where we made our mark. So just to be one of so many of those ladies that were able to make that impact is really special. But yeah, it's hard because I'm so proud of a lot of the things that got me there. I felt like I earned that moment. I felt like, to come back from that morning, having a fever and swimming at night, all of that stuff, I was incredibly proud of. But at the end of the day, no, I didn't achieve what I wanted to at the Olympics. I had high hopes to be an individual Olympic medalist, and I thought it was a realistic opportunity for me. I also thought I had, I'd done the training and I was in a really good place, and I think a bit of it was just the expectation of it that overwhelmed me at the time. And I can't really say what happened the night of the 400. I felt amazing in my prelim, and then things started falling apart at night. But then come the 800, I was so sick the first couple days before, and then the night of the medal, the amount of physical and mental energy that drains out of you. Plus, I was already under the weather, and so things weren't looking good as I approached the 800, and obviously it was my longest and arguably my strongest race. I just didn't have anything in me for that. So a little bit of that is just accepting that things sometimes don't go your way, and a bit of that is just trying to be grateful for the things that did go my way. So reflecting on the year as a whole, thinking about how special NCAA championships were, but in my heart, the most, I guess, rewarding part of it all was when I came home in Christmas time of last year, so Christmas of 2016. Yep. I kind of did. A lot of athletes do almost, we've had Martha McCabe did a cross Canada journey, Ryan Cochran did similar. But for me, for the first time I was home for a month at Christmas because I wasn't training. Normally you're at school until, the wee days of Santa coming. So I was at home for a whole 3 to 4 weeks, which was awesome. I took that time to travel to different club teams, a few little school programs, trying to share my message. A little bit was the story of my career. A little bit was similar to the story that you were referring to with the CBC POV. But a little bit was just kind of sharing my message, talking to kids, being that human factor, I think is huge. Just, being present, having them hold the medal, touch the medal, be in your presence and realize that, you're just another person. You started the exact same way they did. But that experience really showed me how amazing my accomplishment was. And it took any personal, maybe hardships I was having. I'm still to this day, I'm not ecstatic about at the end of the day, I'm an Olympic medalist, but I'm still have some of those challenges when I look back on my career. But I definitely, I know I made the right decision, which is huge, and I'm happy that I can be here and say that. B, traveling to all those groups of children, watching them put that medal around their neck, seeing their faces light up, it puts it all in perspective, and it just made me, A, proud to be a Canadian Olympic medalist, but B, realized how special that for the rest of my life is going to be something now have a tangible piece, a physical thing I can show them, and not necessarily, my proudest moment in my career, which some would think is very odd, but something that others can relate to better, which is really special. And I will continue to try to use that for, a long way into my future, and hopefully impact as many lives as possible.
Yeah. Like we were saying a minute ago, you were a part of something huge for Canada, winning 6 medals. You guys hadn't won a medal in women's swimming in 20 years. Could you tell that was going to be a special group? And what's it like now sitting back and watching as, based on what we saw at Worlds, at World Juniors, this team really could take off?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was awesome, having been to an Olympics before, so I had a little bit to compare it to. And we had some great veterans in London, but there was this kind of gap where, you had your people that had been around a while, and then you had your people that had never been around. And so it's like, how do you kind of find that happy medium? And here I found like we had a much younger team in general. Obviously, we had a lot of teenagers in London. I was the youngest at 18. Here we had a couple 15, 16-year-olds, and that youth had its advantages and disadvantages. I think I've said it so many times in the past, but part of the reason I think, Taylor Ruck and Penny Lexiak did so well at the Olympic Games was they just got up and raced. They weren't overthinking things. The Olympics wasn't this. It was just another meet to them. They didn't realize how big what they were accomplishing was. And I think obviously none of us do until after the fact, but for them, it was huge. Penny was swimming every day at some point, and just kept getting on the blocks and racing like it was provincials down the road from her house. So, and that is just so refreshing to see as an athlete, kind of taking a step back and be like, okay, why aren't we all doing this? And a lot of it's momentum. I mean, we see it in college swimming all the time, people feeding off each other. It was definitely a great group to be around. I think we had an amazing, a training camp, a great environment. It had been a great lead up, I guess, cycle for us. World Championships the year before was good, but I think a lot of it was hosting Pan Am Games in 2015. I mean, swimmers like Kylie and Penny weren't even at that meet. They didn't even qualify. So just so cool to see the transformation, but also just like the home games was a great motivating factor. If they weren't competing, they're there as spectators, enjoying the moment, and it really fueled the passion in our country to actually watch swimming. I think a big thing being a Canadian is just trying to get others to support us. So whether that be the media, the fans, like young children involved in the sport, a lot of it is going to need to continue to grow, but has grown a lot, which is a big deal. I definitely did notice that difference, though. The fresh youth partnered with some experience, and I was considered, a veteran at the Rio Games, but I still felt like I was learning
at 22.
Everyone there. And so there was some great little things that everyone could take from each other, and I think people were open to it. And that may have been something we may have lacked the previous Olympics, but just knowing that, no one's here is better than the rest of us. We can all just learn from each other and take in the experience as one. And it was momentum big time. So we saw, I believe it was the girls relay was the first medal on night one, and then Penny won the first individual medal in the 100 fly, and at that moment, we weren't even sure she was a butterflyer, and we'll continue to be surprised by that one, I'm sure, as years go on. But just kind of realizing when it becomes a realistic thing, you mentioned we hadn't won one for 20 years. So once that starts and you've kind of notched that mark into our history, and then it was just that much easier. And I think it was Hillary Caldwell that I spoke with at the end of the meet. We looked at each other, and we had been around for forever, and Olympic medals were our dream. But we're sitting here, one of, 15 girls that can say the same. And how special is that? Because with prelim swimmers and final swimmers and relay people, for so long it was just this unknown. And by the end, by the time Hillary won her medal on like one of the last nights, we're like, oh yeah, another medal. And it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like I almost felt like, is this what it's like to be, these American swimmers? They're just like, okay, there's another medal for us. Like it's just so bizarre. And we were so excited by each one, but it just became the norm, and we've never had it become the norm. So that was a nice little treat. And you mentioned the World Juniors and this summer's World Championships. I think we're just going in the right direction, and I think a lot of those younger girls choosing to go from Worlds to Junior Worlds is a smart decision. I did so 2011. It was Chantel and I. We did both Worlds and Junior Worlds, and we were relay swimmers at Worlds, and then went to Junior Worlds to swim some more events. And I felt that I gained a lot of knowledge at Worlds, not enough knowledge to, take me throughout a whole career. But then you go to an atmosphere like Junior Worlds where you can stand on the podium and maybe race some people that you're going to be racing in the next quadrennial and in the future. And so it gives you a little bit of confidence and, experience. And it's nice, more international racing, the better, in my opinion. So it's great to see them, although nice that they probably only had to travel to Indianapolis and not, all the way around the world to do so. But
fair enough.
Great facilities they had in Budapest, and then they come back to one they're familiar with in Indianapolis. So yeah, I'm excited for Canadian swimming. I'm excited to remain a fan, and hopefully there's some bright things in the future.
Yeah, I think the future is looking pretty strong for that group of women. So Britt had a lot to say. Check back tomorrow for more of what she had to say, part 2 of Off Deck with Brittany MacLean. I'm David Reeder. We'll see you then.